Tim Mather here. I'm the COO at PMA Tech, and I've been working with NetPoint since it was an idea before it was even a program. And we're also, we have on board Dr. Vivek, and he's our lead developer, and he's been working on the system for over a decade, right?
Yep,
That's
just
great.
over a decade.
That's great. So I'm going to do, this is how we're going to structure this presentation today. I'm going to do a couple topics. One, I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into resources, how you create them, how you apply them, why they're useful, and how to display them, so how you control how they're displayed. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the target that I showed this morning briefly, but I'm going to go into a little more detail on visual target mode and how you set yourself up for success in using visual target mode. And hopefully I don't flip my before and after shots, but if I do, Dr. Vivek will help me out, I'm sure. So the way we're going to format it today, I'm going to present for about a half hour. I'm going to walk through those two items that I discussed, and then Dr. Vivek's going to share his desktop, and he's going to demonstrate some higher order functions in NetPoint for about a half hour. And then for the second hour, we're going to answer any questions that you have. It can be on anything within NetPoint. Together, Dr. Vivek and I, there's probably no question we can't answer in NetPoint. And if we absolutely have to, I guess we could get on the phone with Dr. Gee. But I think we can answer everything. So any questions that you're thinking about, just type them in the chat. And as Zoe said earlier, if you have a question about something that either Dr. Vivek or I are actually demonstrating at that moment, you can just raise your hand. Zoe will unmute you, and you can ask the question to redirect us. We want this to be a fun, interactive, informal learning, and so you can help direct us by chiming in, by staying connected and active. So without further ado, I'm going to get started and start talking about and showing you resources in NetPoint. Resources in NetPoint are super helpful in that they can give you a dynamic view of how resources are being applied across a project. And you can also do what-if scenarios within NetPoint that are very difficult or impossible to do in other tools. So I'm going to start out. The only thing we have here is just this title and these 4 activities. I haven't done anything else. So we're going to go from the very start of creating resources and applying them, and then displaying them, and then moving them around to level resources. So that's kind of the first and large section of my discussion today. So the first thing I want to do is I want to maybe link together activities A, B, and C. And this is something I didn't show this morning in the intro training, but if you link together 3 finish to start activities like that, if you go up to this little chain, it's a finish to start link chain, and click it, then it links all of them together. Just saves you a couple steps if you happen to have a setup like that. So then I'm going to take A, and I'm going to tie it to the finish of A to the start of D. So now this network is logically tied together, and I'm going to create some resources. So to do that, we're going to go to the tools section. And once you're in the tools section, you'll see manage resources. So that's what we're going to do. And you'll see we have no resources to manage. So what we're going to do is create some. And you do that by clicking the new button here. And within the new button, I'm going to say we have carpenters. Carpenters are labor. For the cost per unit, I always just put a 1 in there. You have to put something. So I put a 1 in there, and then I will show you later on how I equate dollars to a resource, and it doesn't actually involve this cost per unit feature. So a little bit of extra jumping around on that. So for carpenters, we're going to make them solid and green, and we're going to say yes to plotting them. So that's all you have to do. Now we have a new resource called carpenters. Next up, I'm going to do electrician, and electricians I'll also put as labor. I'm also going to set that as a 1. Plot yes, solid color, and I think I'm going to choose maybe blue for electricians, maybe cobalt blue, kind of like a shocking blue. No pun. Oh wait, pun intended. Okay, so now we have these 2 resources. They're not assigned to anything yet. So the next step in our process would be to assign them. So in order to leave this resource properties box, what I'm going to do is click this red X up here and close them. So now we're back here. We have these 2 resources. They're both set to be plotted, but we haven't assigned them. So let me move this down and to the right a little bit, and then I'm going to click on the assign button. Now at the top here, it says, which resource are you assigning? And how would you like the list of your activities sorted? So I said sorted by description, and look at that, A, B, C, D. And I'm going to be assigning carpenters. So carpenters are actually going to be assigned to B and D. So in B, I'm going to use 10 carpenters, and in D, I'm going to use 5. Oops, I messed that one up. 5 carpenters. So now we have those 2 assigned, and I want to go over to this distribution field, because that's a really important field when you're making a resource assignment. The distribution field says, how are these resources going to be consumed? So in this first case, what we've selected is it will be 10 carpenters per day, every day of the activity. Whereas if you were to say duration, it would be 10 carpenters for the entire duration. So that's a big difference. If you have a 74-day activity like you do with B, and you're only going to use a total of 10 carpenters, then you're going to be using a very fractional carpenter each day. So some examples of where you might use it per day versus per duration. Let's say that you are going to use a crane, and that's going to be a resource on your project. That one you can't really fractionalize. You're going to have a crane there every day during that activity, and so that's how that's going to be applied. Whereas per duration might be an oversight task that you're going to do, and maybe it's just half an hour a day of somebody walking by and taking a look at something. So in that case, you could say, well, I'm guessing this is going to take a total of 15 hours for this activity, and so you'd say 15. The rate is 15, and do it by duration. So then it'll just divide that evenly across the activities. One important point often comes up when we're talking about activities. We are a flat distribution here. It's a straight line. We don't have a ramp up capability that some of the other tools have. So this is kind of a big picture way of doing it. If you absolutely need to ramp up, what you can do is you can take the activity and split it into smaller pieces, and then assign the resources to each of those pieces. So for instance, if you wanted to ramp up on activity A, what you would do is just split activity A into A1, A2, A3, A4, and then you could create kind of a curve of resources by assigning them to each of those sections in the numbers that you want. So now we have these activities that are set, they're assigned for carpenters. And so then let's go ahead and change it to electricians. And electricians is going to be assigned to A and C. And we're going to do 5 and 7. Gosh, I'm not quite getting that that box right. I blame the developers, but that's just me. I'm an end user. So now I have those assigned. And again, when you have a window in NetPoint that doesn't have a close button, that means that we've recorded all the information you've entered, and all you have to do is click that X, and now it's gone. So we've created some resources. We have assigned them to some activities, and nothing has happened. Why is that? Well, because you have to close this box first. And when you close that box, then your resources will be displayed. And as you can see here, we have the electricians. Remember, they were kind of the cobalt blue. And then we have the carpenters, and they were green. And you'll see here that I did this on purpose, where I assigned carpenters to both B and D. And that way you can see how the resources are getting amped up there for that section of D. So it's additive. And so just to give you a quick demonstration in NetPoint, one of the great things is you can actually see the resources being used across the project, and you can do what if scenarios. So eventually what we're going to do is we're going to level this carpenter area. And but before we do that, I want to change the way this looks. These curves here are cumulative curves of the resources, total resources, and then you kind of have an early, a planned date, and a late date curve being applied. Now, none of that is very obvious to the casual observer. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back up to our tools, and we're going to say, what I want to do is modify the resource display settings. And within that, then you have the option of saying, well, I'd like a ruler for the baseline, and I would like to turn off the early and late dates. And let's just see what that gets us. So now we have this baseline ruler over here, and it's showing the total resources being used from the start of the project through the end of this plan. And it says 1800. And oftentimes people say to me, well, what does that mean? And what it means is it can mean anything you want it to mean. So this could be dollars per day. It could be crews per day. It could be individual workers per day. However you want to assign it, you can do that within NetPoint. So we don't do any real fancy, kind of multiplying math where we say, well, you got a crew of 4 people and they're each going to work 7.2 hours a day, and then it'll be 10 days. We don't do any of that. You assign the resource to the activity, and then we add them up. So on this individual activity of B, when we go to look at resource assignment, you can see that we've assigned 10 units per day of carpenters. And so that's what gets added up. So you've got 74 days of carpenters plus 44 days of carpenters assigned at a different level. And that gets you a baseline total plus the electrician's time. So you can see here we have this resource spike, and resource spikes are typically frowned upon because you get things kind of crowded and you have a whole bunch of people in there. It'd be nicer to level it. We've got some time before the end of the project here, so I'm going to scoot activity C over a little bit, and I'm going to scoot activity B over a little bit. And I'm trying to just dead eye this. It looks like I have some more scooting to do. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to split D into 2 activities, and then I'm going to move D so that it kind of falls outside of the section where the carpenters are assigned in B. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hover right kind of in the middle of it, or wherever you want it to split. You can split it anywhere you want. And then you do a right mouse click, and it will show you the split activity function. And the split activity then says start D, complete D, and it's going to break this into 2, and it's going to link the complete D to the start D. So now I'm going to move this complete D over see if I can just get it. Perfect. So close. Oh, 1 day off. All right. And then I'm going to move over here. And looks like I have some extra room here. So that tells me if I move B back 1 day, and then I move comp D back 1 day, and then I move start D back 1 day, or 2 days, or 3 days. Oh, no, that's right. Okay. Yeah. So there you go. Now we have done a good job of leveling off these two activities so that they're not interfering with each other anymore. You don't have that big spike coming in the middle. And you can imagine this could be helpful in all kinds of planning methods where you say, well, for instance, maybe there's some seasonality to the work and you want to move activities out of a super cold season or a super wet season or a migratory bird season. I've seen all those examples in my scheduling work. So I think some of the key benefits you'll see here are that in NetPoint, you are in control of where you put activities on the canvas. You know, in a regular kind of CPM tool back from the 1950s, you would be stuck with either constraining this to this date, or it's going to slide all the way back to its earlier date. So that's one of the cool things. We put the planners in charge, and they get to decide where they want their activities to be placed. And let me just turn on here for a second, drift, so you can see mathematically what is apparent visually. So let's see. I'll turn on drift and float. There we go. Okay. I'm not sure what I did wrong, but I'm just going to do that again. I'm going to select them. I'm going to go to objects, set properties for selected objects. And I'm going to turn on drift and float. And right now my zoom thing is blocking my OK button. But okay, there we go. So let's see if that works out better. Yeah. So you can see here now that you have all this left to right room to move in the schedule and to manipulate your resource deployment within the project. And so you can do an endless number of what if scenarios with your team, talking about labor deployment, talking about location, seasonality, all those things can work together. And you can see the picture right here. And as I mentioned earlier today, NetPoint has basically an unlimited undo and redo feature, which is so great. What if you had that in life? That would be so good. But you can keep undoing and you can redo. So you don't have to be afraid of trying different things or what anything like that. Another thing to note is that resources always go along with their activities. So if, for instance, you were to copy activity B and then paste it, we'll paste it in grid 2. So all of a sudden, you have more resources assigned in the center section. You can see the scale here has changed quite a bit. And that's because this version of B, which I'll call E, took the resource assignments from the activity you copied. And so wherever you paste it, then you're going to also have those resources. So bring that up. Yep, there you go. Assigned just in the same way. So if you were to grab E and start moving it, then you would see the carpenters getting moved throughout the resource allocations. So that's, oh, I have one more thing I want to show you on this, and then I may go a few minutes over my 30 minutes. I apologize, Dr. Vivek. It's a non-compensable delay. I understand that. So I wanted to show you back in modify resource display settings. I want to show you a few of these options here, which are quite powerful. And I also Well, you know what? I'm definitely going to go over because I also want to show how to do a limit on resources. So here you can see you can change how the histograms totals are calculated. I left it on daily. You can fix the histogram to the bottom so that as you scroll through a much larger plan, the histogram will always show. That's auto scroll. If you fix it to the bottom, then when you scroll up to the top of a big plan, you won't see your histogram anymore. So unless you have a good reason, I would leave it on auto scroll. And then this height of plots, that determines how much of the canvas is consumed by the plot. So if you create this down, let's just go down to 10. Oh, 10. Uh-oh. Can't drive my own bus. Okay, there we go. So 10% of this canvas, when I say this, will now be consumed by the histogram. You can see you have more room to see the plan, but the histogram's a little more scrunched. So I'm actually going to go back and make that a little bit bigger again for my next act. Whoa, not 52 though. That's too much. Let's go 22. Okay. Now, you have the ability in NetPoint resources to apply a resource limit. And so a resource limit would show you, for instance, let's say that you're trying to plan cash flow for a project. You could say my maximum cash flow burn rate is $100,000 a day. And then if you apply all your spend in resources, you'll see areas in the plan where that goes over $100,000 a day. And then you can do one of these resource leveling exercises to kind of smooth things out. So I'm going to go back into manage resources, and I'm going to go down to this limit button, and I'm going to create a resource limit for my carpenters. So select the carpenters. The ceiling is 20. The increment is 2. That means that the most resources you have assigned right now is 20. And it's going to go, the scale is going to go by 2s. And then I'm going to start my assignment, click on this little button that says you're assigning now. And then I'm just going to drag this line across a certain time period in the schedule. And that establishes the limit for that resource. Now, it doesn't look any different right now because I haven't yet clicked this resource limits button. When I click that, then you'll see that it turns red in the areas where the resources are exceeding your specified limit. And so if I start to move this off because the limit is only for that time period, you could put it there. This one, let's see if I have enough room. Yeah, I do. I have enough room to level that out. So now I'm not over limit on any of my resources there. So that's kind of a quick but deep look at resources. And coming up next, I just want to spend a minute or two showing you the visual target mode. Anybody who was on the session this morning, I got a question about it, so I did a quick answer. But visual target mode is a way to display changes in the schedule from one update to the next to compare updates or baseline versus update. And in order to use this function, you need to start with data date. You need to drop a data date on the schedule and do an update. So I'm going to do that here. You'll see it's asking me, do I want to capture a target before the update? And if you are thinking you're going to want to use this function, the answer is always yes, capture. So now we have the data date in place. You can see that we have these 3 activities are qualified for actualization or progressing. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to make some changes. I'm going to drag this one out a little bit. And I'm going to start this one a little later. That's what happens in projects. Things don't always go exactly as you think. And then I'm going to leave B alone. So I made those changes. Now I'm going to do some actualization. I'm going to do that by managing schedule progress here. I did a right mouse click just on the empty part of the canvas and it brought that up. You can see here, I have A, B, and start D are all qualified based on where the data date is. And I'm just going to actualize them now. So what that does is for A, it's completely encased in this blue wrapper, and that's because it's completely actualized. Whereas start D is only about half, well, exactly half actualized. You have 21 days that have elapsed, 21 days remaining. And then just a little bit of B has been actualized. So now, if I come up here and select this visual target mode and move myself out of the way so I can see my boxes, you can see here that we have the current state and we have the new target. And this morning, Vivek had to save me because I clicked the wrong button. So I want to drag these out so we can see them a little bit better. So help me out, Vivek. I want to do the base as current state or new target.
The new target basis against which you want to calculate your variance.
Okay, so base is new target?
Yeah, that's the previous state.
Got it. Okay, thank you. And then alternate is the current state, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you can see here I have the ability to control how the canvas appears. You can add filters to it. So I'm going to say, for instance, if the finish date is at least 2 days behind, then I want to change the size of the bar to larger. And that's the only change I'm going to make there. I want to show the shadows. I'm going to apply this. And then I'll get these boxes out of the way so we can actually see the canvas. And you can see here, these two are highlighted. And they're highlighted because there has been a change as you compare the original baseline, which is the gray, and the first update actuals. I'm 7 days late on A because it started late. I'm 6 days late here because A pushed start D, but then I'm 26 days off because it was also an extended duration. So this tells just an amazing story so clearly what has changed in the schedule, what's impacted, and gives you the capability to demonstrate to team members and participants in the project exactly what's going on with each update. And you can compare different updates. So let's say that you're a year into the project and you have 12 updates. You can compare 11 versus 12. You don't always have to compare to the baseline. And I think with that said, I'm going to hand the baton over to Dr. Vivek, which means that I'm going to move some stuff out of the way so that I can stop sharing. I think I'm going to move some stuff out of the way. There we go. I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Vivek.
Thank you, Tim. Okay. Please let me know when you can see my screen.
I can see your screen.
Okay. So for this demo today, I'll go through some of the features that were referenced to in the earlier sessions. The first one that I want to do is the layout manager that John kind of went over a little bit to show when you are importing schedules from other tools like P6, Microsoft Project, Excel, or OpenPlan. And in that case, how does Layout Manager basically help? In this particular case, I've opened a schedule which is more laid out manually, but yeah, it does not have to be laid out in any manner. You could have activities all on a single grid and Autograph can still lay it out for you. The idea basically is to minimize clashes as much, so not have links that are lying underneath activities, not having too many crossing links, not having objects that are related being too far away. So I'll open up Layout Manager from this menu drop down from here. And the first step that I'm going to take, it's not a necessary step, but just something for later to show. So I'll take a snapshot of what the layout currently is. I can rename it as the initial layout. Now, after that, I can, if I want to, I can go ahead, jumble them up, mix them, overlap them. Now you have a mix of things, but I can go in to the structure tab. Let me first lay out the schedule by WBS. And if you have a WBS already defined, then this checkbox is enabled. Once you enable that, you have a choice to say, okay, whether you want to lay out by WBS or by codes. For now, I've chosen WBS. And if you have more levels than one, then you can lay out to those levels. Over here, I just have a single level WBS.
And you
Not
can,
really real schedule, I would say, but for a 30, 35 activity schedule, too many levels did not make sense. So
Vivek, can you bring in a WBS or codes from P6?
yes, when you import from P6, WBS and codes are imported into NetPoint.
Great.
So now I can quickly run. I needed to keep the schedule a little smaller because it does, for larger schedule, it does take a little bit of time for NetPoint to come up with an optimized layout for you. So in this particular case, Autograph is done. It has laid out the schedule for you. It has laid it out in different groups. So we have the design group, we have the general group, a substructure group, and so on. So for each WBS, you're kind of seeing, each WBS node, you're kind of seeing a lane. And within that lane, all the tasks that are assigned to that WBS node are laid out. Now, let's say if I wanted to go back and see what my original layout was. I do no longer want to see it grouped by WBS. I want to go back. I can simply click on the initial layout and say apply. And I can easily switch back into different views of the same schedule instantly. I can even, if let's say I didn't want to do by structure, I just have a small schedule that I brought in from P6. I no longer want to do it by WBS, but as a single lane, as a single piece of network, I can run that through, and that again quickly happens. You can create different views like this. You can use it by codes. So you can say, maybe if you have codes by location or codes based on other project managers and things like that. So you can lay out objects like that. So now you see Autograph resulted in a different layout than what it was before. The reason being the initial layout was more of a manual layout. Layout 3 was generated. So this one was with WBS and this one was just a network without WBS.
And Vivek, I can chime in with a example that was super helpful for us. We were working on a schedule for one of the national laboratories, and they wanted to see one version of the schedule that showed what was going on in different geographic locations, different national lab offices and laboratories around the world. And then they wanted another one that showed the same schedule, but sorted or arranged by phase. And so we were able to just quickly switch between those and show leadership both views without having to do really any extra work, thanks to this feature.
Yep. Yeah, so yeah, basically, if you had those different views saved as layouts, you can easily switch between them. John also mentioned over here that about layout score on how basically Autograph tries to optimize the layout score. So the algorithm it uses kind of tries to minimize the score, but it is not finding the idea is not to find the best layout, means that just takes too much time for it to lay out. So it tries to get to a more optimal layout. And as you can see, manually, I was able to do a better job. I got a score of 239, but the algorithm came pretty close at a 284. So it definitely sees that the network layout right now is worse than the initial layout. So potentially you maybe want to switch back to just keep the initial layout and apply that and not use the other one. Or else maybe there is a reason for you to use the network layout, because let's say the WBS one is significantly higher, but there is a reason why it's higher. You do have objects laid out in their WBS lanes. And so there are links that are probably going from one WBS node all the way down to the last WBS node. So there are longer links, there are more clashes and crossing of links basically happening, and that's why the score is higher.
And
So
since this is advanced training, let's peel back the onion a little bit and just give a little explanation of I think this is one of the areas where we have some patents too. So just kind of explain how we get this amazing job done of sorting out a schedule and splitting it apart like that.
yeah, so basically the layout manager provides you, the user, with all the control as to how you want to lay out your schedule. There are several aspects that we kind of have them divided into, and you kind of say what's more important for you when you're laying out schedules. So in this particular layout, if you see, this critical path kind of goes through different grids. Whereas if you switch over to the network layout, you will see that Autograph tried to put the critical path kind of together. And if we look at why that is, to see that, one of the criteria that is there is how do you want to prioritize objects being placed. So right now, with all my layouts that I did, I chose float chains, which means that the total float should flow and equal total float paths should be closer to each other. And that's why you see the critical path being placed all as one. And that was my intent with the float chains. Maybe that is not what you want. Maybe you do just want that the next set of activities that come up are closer. So you maybe want to go to logic step. And if you run with that, it will give you a slightly different layout, which might match closer with what my initial layout was. So these are conditions that you can tell how Autograph lays out your schedule, and you kind of prioritize them. Then comes the part of scoring and stuff. So for the scoring aspect, I will go to links first. And for under links, there is a group called penalties. And this basically says, how do you want to, what's worse for you? What is a bad scenario for you? And based on what the relative scenario is, you give them a score. So right now, if the link crosses an activity, it basically penalizes that as 25 points. So any of the time the link crosses, it kind of crosses over the description. So that causes more confusion as to whether maybe it is going into this activity, maybe it's going behind, I can't read the text. So it does not, we have given it a higher penalty when that happens. When it crosses another link, it's less of an issue. Let me see if I can see one over here. So maybe there is an overlap and a cross, over here, but none really that are crossing links, like horizontal, vertical, and diagonal links crossing at a single point. So those get penalized a little less. Again, different kinds of penalties that you can say which kind of links you want to avoid. Maybe if it has a deleg, you want to give it a very high penalty, and you don't want to allow delinks in your schedule. That might be some priority that you have. There are other settings that you could do that, let's say when John brought in things from P6, one of the issues that happened was that for smaller tasks, even though Autograph lays out things and lays out the text and kind of puts them in multiple rows, but it is possible that because they are so small activities, you do not want them to be in the same lane because you know that the text will kind of overlap. So let's say I'm looking at SD set and DD set activity over here. I can go in and say, okay, do not allow activities, two activities that are right next to each other, zero gap linked. And if they are less than, means over here, because they are pretty big, so I will make them 2 inches. So if an activity is less than 2 inches, then the next activity cannot be placed right next to it if it is also less than 2 inches. So if I just do that, what my expected behavior should be that SD set and DD set will no longer be on the same grid, and Autograph would place them on 2 separate grids because of that reasoning. And that's exactly what happens. So because of this requirement, now SD set places in DD set in a different row, in a different grid. And that allows you to resolve more of those text clashes if that was the case. And because of our condition, you see there are other activities that are getting affected because many of those activities do get under that consideration of being less than 2 inches. So yes, it's an easier way to lay out. It's an easier way to clean up any of the text clashes you were, but is this really a better schedule for you or not? A better layout? It's dependent on what you are trying to get out of it.
And just a quick reminder to our audience, the second half of this session, which is coming up about 15 minutes, is relying on you guys to ask questions. So if you have any questions about NetPoint, any question at all, this is your opportunity to get it right from the founding fathers, as it were.
Okay. And again, you have many similar options, how you want to lay out. Do you even want to stack activity descriptions? Do you want to allow links with a deleg or not? Do you want to automatically hide any links that are just to have a lot of gap in it? Means basically they're not driving, and maybe if it's a gap of 100 days, is that link even necessary to be displayed? So kind of removing some of the noise that's in the schedule. So you can choose between different options to kind of optimize the best look for how you want to lay out your schedule. Autograph gives you that capability over here. Let me switch back to my initial layout quickly. And now so John also kind of showed you a way on how you can identify a redundant link. So in this particular schedule, I do not have any redundant links right now. But I do see that from shops, RNA, and delivery, I have a link to steel joists and decking. And from steel joists and decking, I have a link to wall windows and doors. So if I also add a link from shops, RNA, delivery to walls, windows, that will be a redundant link. If I double click on it to confirm, NetPoint does see that as a redundant link. So if you have any redundant links in your network, Layout Manager will flag them. So if you were to kind of find all the redundant links in your schedule, you can come down to Layout Manager, go to the Links tab, and you can look at all the redundant links. From here, you can select all of them and delete, or you can just simply hide them if you're not sure of deleting them. So hiding, fading, or deleting, you can do from here. You can also come here and even though Autograph gives you the option to hide But maybe after the fact, you realize, yeah, I do have certain links that I want to hide or fade. Then you can hide them from here. If you want to hide links between lanes, you can just keep them displayed or hidden or faded just to remove the noise if that's what you're looking for. So Autograph kind of gives you a ton of that control into how you want to lay out your schedule on the canvas. So it simplifies bringing in schedules from P6 and MS Project, which do not have the capability to lay out schedules like NetPoint does. And it also kind of eases that pain of the import. So if you kind of keep bringing in too many schedules, each time you bring them in, you have to lay them out, unless that schedule was imported but exported out from NetPoint at some point in the past. Okay. Apart from this, Layout Manager also does have a list of statistics. These are more related to links and densities. Other than these statistics, NetPoint also does have a couple of other statistics. So you can go into the metrics menu and see view schedule statistics. So it has a lot more. So it has about 34 activities, has 10 hammocks, 54 links. I do have one redundant link in here that I just added. Zero gap links are 43. How many milestones benchmarks? So you get quite a few metrics over here. But along with NetPoint also comes a companion tool, which is ScheduleMD, which can also be accessed from the metrics menu. And if you go to Open Metrics Manager, what it does is it gives you the ability to do some quantitative look at how reliable your schedule is. So you can provide certain inputs over here. For now, I will skip that part just in the interest of time and show you how ScheduleMD works. So off the bat, it gives me a score of 35 on this schedule. It says the schedule is unreliable, and it is calculating the score based on these criteria or these groups of metrics. These groups are kind of also represented at the top, so you can dive into each one. So let me go into the credible one where I'm failing. It seems the X marks as failing. So let me look at these metrics, and it says, yeah, this group says credible. For a schedule to be credible, it needs to be predictive, risk, weather fit, resource flowing, and flexible. And I am none of those. My schedule is none of those. So I can go into the predictive to kind of see why it's complaining about that. Okay. So it says, okay, within predictive, it has 4 metrics that it's using to kind of identify and has a tripwire set with each one of them. So it says critical activities. I have 29% of my activities critical in my schedule, which falls within the range. And so I get a green check. On the schedule margin, I get a 0%. I have absolutely no margin on the schedule. And if I have no margin on the schedule, what is the likelihood of this schedule completing on time? I will guarantee that it's 0%. So if I bring back my project N over here, I can see my project N kind of blends into the color. All right, this zoom controls over here. So this project N kind of is right there. So I did not mean to move the startup commissioning. So let me just move that down so that it's visible clearly where my project completion is. Oops. Too many down arrows. Okay. So basically we see that the project completion happens right after startup and commissioning, and it is stuck to the last activity because I've set it as calculated. Let me mark this as fixed and then allow a month after the startup and commissioning basically indicating that this is an early finish schedule. And I do have some schedule margin at the end. Now, because I have schedule margin, my predictive score improves to a 68, and my schedule margin, I have 10%. The expected range is 5 to 10, and it is still within that, so I'm good, and I get a green check. So you can go in and kind of improve upon what is missing in your schedule using ScheduleMD, kind of find out what are the typical industry best practices that you should use when you're building the schedule. So I'm also seeing I have inadequate float on 44% of my tasks. If I wanted to see what those activities were, I can go into matching objects over here, and it shows me, yes, everything basically on the critical path, which is 0 total float, I am tied down over there. Again, my critical path float, if it's 0, that means that, yeah, I mean, any delay on it will be meant as a delay. And the reason for that being the case is this benchmark that I have placed that everything ties down to. So this particular phase does not have any float. The startup and commissioning basically has float. So I can move out my startup and ready for commissioning benchmark to kind of phase my float to the first half also, some of it, and the remaining to the startup and commissioning. And I can adequately, if I still wanted to show my critical path, let's see, I will increase the criticality threshold to, let's say, 15 for now. And my critical path comes back. So if I go back into ScheduleMD, now only 18% of the tasks have inadequate flow. So less than a fifth of the activities have low float. So that's okay, and I get a green check. So basically, I'm slowly improving my score. My predictive score is now at 83, which is higher than the 80. This had an impact on my credible score, still not high enough. But if I go back to summary, my score did improve from 35 to 43. So basically, I can dive into each individual tab, look at each individual metric to see what's wrong. Maybe in certain cases that's justified, and when it's justified, we document that. And where it's not justified, we try to mitigate that issue. Other than that, ScheduleMD does also do DCMA metrics. So the 14 DCMA metrics you can do, they are also grouped into each one. Or you can go into export to Excel and give out a DCMA report. And it gives you a formatted Excel report for all the DCMA metrics. You can also do other reports that are in here. Just export them out to Excel. Okay.
Great. We do have,
that pretty much wraps up what I wanted to show.
good. We do have quite a few questions, so I can start reading those, and you and I can just collaborate on answering them.
Sure.
Okay. R. Donaldson asks, could you not do resource link and fade them? I guess maybe if R. Donaldson is still on, Zoe, could you unmute and we could get some more explanation on that?
Sure, just a second.
Thank you.
Hey, Tim, how's it going?
Great, how are you?
Good. Yeah, so that was more or less just during your resource presentation. I was more or less just looking at it saying, like, could you not, I know sometimes you don't want to put redundant links inside, but it, like, what we typically do is we usually just create a soft link as a resource link, and then we fade it. And that was just kind of not really a question. It was more or less just kind of maybe a tip for other users to potentially implement in their schedules in case they didn't want, I guess, activity D to slip into activity B because the resources are flowing from D to B.
Yeah, that
They
makes
could always add in the soft link.
Yeah, I like that idea. That's cool.
It wasn't really a question. It was more or less just a comment. That's all.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Next question, Cecilia asks, can we graphically update by % complete? I don't think we can. There is a place in the properties where you can say % complete for an activity, but it doesn't actually impact the actualization. You can export that estimated complete out to a spreadsheet and use that to report back. So basically, it gives the person managing the schedule the ability to put their own estimate of complete regardless of what's coming back from the field. And that was actually a custom feature for a very specific client use. That's me.
I think Cecilia also raised her hand just now. Maybe she has a follow-up.
Yeah, okay. Let's see. I'm not sure if I can unmute Sid, but maybe I can. I think I can.
Hi.
Hi.
Well, and the next question would be, you know, what do you do with all the different types of % complete that P6 offers? I don't know too many clients who really are specific about those things, but you know, like there's cost % or physical % complete.
You mean when you're importing from P6?
Yes. Do you lose that?
So if I can take that question. So on the import from P6, NetPoint basically just takes the data date and the new duration. So basically, if the activity is 33% complete in P6, the duration for it automatically gets updated. That means 33% complete when it should have been 50%. Its duration gets updated based on that, the remaining duration. And that remaining duration is accordingly imported into NetPoint. But yes, the actual % values don't really get imported into NetPoint.
Great. Next up, can we explain how NetPoint performs forensic float analysis? I'll take my first stab at this, and then Dr. Vivek can help out too. So the GPM algorithm allows us to track criticality and float calculations left of the data date, which the CPM algorithm does not allow. And so given that capability to track float left of the data date and criticality left of the data date, the ability to actually see the impact of changes to the right of the data date on the critical path to the left of the data date is just visual and graphical and real time. So instead of you know, going through hours and hours of a time impact analysis, you could just start unpopping data dates from right to left, and you can see the impact of changes throughout the schedule, real live data. Dr. Vivek?
And don't have much to add over there.
Okay.
But yeah, that's exactly what it is.
Great. What's the best way to print the whole layout with the best resolution? Oh, I have tricks here, believe me. I said this morning in the intro training, it's very important to understand what format you want to print out on and select that as your page size, because NetPoint's very sensitive to the printer that you're using. It's dependent on that printer. Our next release of, well, when we start printing with Project Summit, it will not be printer dependent, which will be a major improvement. But for now, you have to pay attention when you start what size you want to print out. But there are some tricks. For instance, if you print to a PDF and then you open that PDF in a full version of Adobe, then you can really hone how big the printout is, and the resolution is just fantastic on that. So that would be my recommendation. If you're looking to manipulate the size, just like a little bit bigger than 8.5 by 11, and you just want to shrink it a little bit, that's the way to do it. You put it in PDF, and then when you go into Adobe, you say fit to page, and it'll do a nice job of arranging everything for you. So that's my tips and tricks there. You're getting years of experience here in just minutes. Okay, Mr. Donaldson again. When will NetPoint implement a tool to allow users to create their own path? You mean basically like draw the path, the link between? I don't know if that's even on the order board at the moment, but if it's important to our end users, we always consider it. So we will get together as a team and talk about that, the risks and the inherent benefits of that, and we'll let you know. Let's see, is it possible that we save a layout from one schedule for another schedule? I don't think that's a possibility, is it, Dr. Vivek?
No, that is not.
Okay.
So as soon as you delete means, let's say it's not a different schedule, but it's the same schedule, but you have activities deleted. Once you delete the activities, they will get deleted from all the layouts.
Got it. How can you make drift float display whenever you add an activity automatically? Okay, well, if you go up to the objects menu, you can go to the set default properties for new objects. And there you can determine what each new object will look like when you populate it onto the canvas. So you do have the option of saying, I want float and drift to always show, or I want all the activities I create from this point on to be yellow versus green, or however you want the new activities show up. This is the way to do it. Can linked documents be live, as in latest drawing, etc.? Yes. It really comes down to what you've linked it to. So what Cecilia is asking about is the information object, which if you drop that on the canvas, then you will be able to link it to a document just to the right of the data date.
Yeah, unfortunately, that Zoom controls. It's
Oh, okay.
Top right there. So
Okay, I got it. So if you link that, let's say you link it to a spreadsheet, then whatever the latest version of the spreadsheet is what will pop up when you call on that document to populate. So you browse, you find that spreadsheet. If it's a PDF, obviously you'd have to replace the PDF with a newer version. So if it's a live document, it'll show up live. We actually will call the underlying application. So let's say it's a CAD drawing. We'll bring that up in the CAD tool on your desktop. One note, if you're building a plan, make sure that if you're going to be someplace else when you're showing the plan, that you have access to the linked documents, because you don't want to show up at the client's location and have it not pop up. Is it possible when the switch between layouts, summary bars stay always on the top of the canvas? I don't think so. I think you can't block off something and say, don't sort this like you could in an Excel spreadsheet, right?
So what you can do is you can create a new layout in a manner where objects don't move. So under the structure tab, there is an additional menu called locking. So you can go in here and you can turn on locking, pick up all your summary bars, which are these, and you basically go and lock them. So the next layout that you create will not shift these objects from where they are.
Great. Okay, can we change the position of dates to above or next to a node? Sure. If you use the global edit feature, you can you have complete control over where any of the highlighted items will reside, and they will always move with the activity in that relative way. Doesn't look like those are moving, Dr. Vivek. Oh, there you go. Woo!
And you can lock them to be together.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Can users use a mobile app to say update in the field or attach photos? That would be a very qualified yes. If you had a Microsoft Surface and it was running a Microsoft operating system, and you were running NetPoint on that Surface, on that operating system, you could update the schedule. But there is no mobile app, or there's no way to remotely update the schedule. Is it possible to have both the calendar dates and the ordinal dates on the calendar? I think it's an either or, isn't it, Dr. Vivek?
Yep.
Yep.
So it is kind of yes. So when you're setting, you can set it to be physical or ordinal, but then even though you have physical chosen, you can show it as ordinal.
Okay. Got it. Can NetPoint capable to import baseline / base in Visual Manager? So if you're importing a P6 schedule, can you export to an XER the baseline? And if so, then you could import that baseline into NetPoint, which would be a visual version of that, I think. You agree with that, Dr. Vivek?
So yes, but you would not be able to, in NetPoint, save that baseline as a target for another NetPoint file. That would be,
Oh, right.
that would be the restriction, I would say.
Right, good point. But you could potentially, that could be the baseline in NetPoint, and then you could make
Yeah,
changes to it
manually go in and make changes to it to update.
if you wanted to demonstrate a particular baseline change graphically.
Yeah.
You demonstrate how to export the extents to of the current schedule to an image. Oh, yeah. So up in File, we have this snapshot version, and you can take a snapshot of the whole schedule or a part of the schedule, and that'll put it in your copy buffer. And then if you're, going to, for instance, Microsoft PowerPoint, you can just paste the snapshot of the schedule into PowerPoint. Or even Paint. There you go. Nice.
So I took a very small pixel size.
Got it.
Yeah.
So that looks like we've exhausted our questions, and hopefully not our questioners. So we'll give it just a minute or two in case anybody wants to chime in with comments or questions. But Vivek and I are both available, via email or however you can get a hold of us. We're always happy to talk NetPoint, details of NetPoint, the future of NetPoint, anything having to do with NetPoint.